Hello and welcome to EE233. I'm your instructor, Gregory Myers. In this particular video, we're going to take a look at the printf function, and specifically we're going to focus on how to format integers. This is part of a larger series of videos focusing on the fundamentals of the C programming language, and a sort of a subset of these is going to be looking at how do you format data once you want to print it out to the user. A lot of our console applications are going to want to print out friendly information or data or information in a friendly manner rather to the user. And this is sort of the beginnings of those. And so what you should do for this video is make sure that you have gotten a working C development environment, but also get a copy of this formatting integers.c, or take a second to pause the video and go ahead and make a copy of it from the video. Like in the previous examples, I'm going to go ahead and copy over the function prototype as well as the function itself. And I'm just simply going to put this at the bottom of our file. Now, assuming that you had working C code before, if we build this, our fundamentals.c should still work. And in fact, it does. It gets us no warnings and builds successful. And so what you want to do now is in your main, go ahead and comment out any other functions that you might have. And we simply want to make a call to the formatting integers example using parentheses and then followed by a semicolon. So call to the format integers demo. I like to put a little bit of a comment after each one of these just so that you know what the function does. In this case, it's kind of pretty descriptive here, but later on it may not be so descriptive. So at this point, you can go ahead and close out your formatting integers snip. You can go ahead and build it one last time, and we should have working code. At this point, you can just jump out to the console. You can type in CLS, which is going to just clear the screen, take us back to a blank screen. If you notice, I'm already in my fundamentals demo folder, and I'm just simply going to run my fundamentals demo.exe, and you'll see some rather bizarre output. I'm going to go ahead and split the screen between NetBeans and my console just so that you can see what this does. Now, instead of scrolling, I'd like to take a second to show you a little bit of a shortcut here. And so as our file gets longer, we don't want to just simply scroll up and down, especially if we have multiple functions that we want to take a look at. Instead, what you can do is you can simply just right-click on the function, in this case, the function call, and you can go to the declaration definition, and it will just simply jump down to where we pasted the code at the bottom of the source file. Now, I'm going to just go ahead and leave the screen broken up this way. You'll see that there's just a little bit more information in the table title and some comments. But essentially, the purpose for this example is just to see how we can control the formatting of integers by simply putting some dead space, if you would, at the beginning. And so you'll notice here that we're using the same integers, 234 and negative 234. So we get an example of both unsigned and signed integers. Signed integers, of course, having the ability to be both positive or negative. Now, we're not declaring any variables here. We could have just as easily went ahead and declared a couple of variables and then just printed the values of the variables. Instead, we're just going to hard code the value 234, and we'll get a chance to do some more sophisticated things later. But you'll notice here that my format spec, and that is related to the printf function. As a matter of fact, if you've not yet done so, I encourage you to take a look at the printf function in the Wikibooks example. I've provided you a link for that. And specifically, you want to take a look at the type, and you'll notice that a D is a decimal or an integer value that may be either signed or unsigned. And if we take a look now at the number preceding it, we hadn't yet covered this, you'll see there's a 4. So essentially what it's saying is I can print up to 4 places in my integer value here. And so if you notice, my number 234 only has 3. So essentially what happens is you end up padding it to the left. And so I'm allocating a total of 4 spaces, but I'm only using 3 of them. And so this blank space, then there's essentially a character there, but there's no, it's not an integer value. And so this pad right there, as well as 5 then in the next example, gives you a total of 5 total places to be able to print 234. And so essentially what we're doing here is we are right justifying it. Likewise with 6, but notice particularly what happens when you pick a value that's too small. It's not as if you truncate it just simply to the number 4 or even the number 2, depending on which way you would expect it to happen. Instead, what happens is it simply just overflows and continues to print. In this case, what it does is it goes ahead and uses the minimum amount of space needed, in this case, 3 total places. So if you accidentally use a number too small, nothing's going to happen other than your formatting isn't necessarily going to be what you want it to be. So what would I recommend that you do is always pick a value for the total size to be longer than the largest value that you would expect to handle. Now this gets a little more complicated, particularly when you're dealing with doubles, but when we're focusing on integers, this should be pretty straightforward. For instance, if you think about the number of digits associated with a check in a checkbook, or maybe a user account or something along those lines. So they may be limited to a fixed number of digits, maybe 8, for instance, or 4 in the case of a checkbook. So if we continue on here, you'll see how we handle negative values. And so in this particular case, then the negative sign essentially eats up one of those spaces, and that's not too terribly surprising, so that we have a total of 4 spaces required for negative 234. When we increase it to 5, then you get an extra space at the beginning. With 6, you get 2 extra spaces at the beginning, and then so on. But what happens if you accidentally make it too small? Once again, it will go ahead and print out the value, but as you'll see in more complicated examples, you'll have some unwanted behavior in the table. And what we're going to do is when we get into loops, I'll show you how this plays out, particularly when you want to have a nice looking table involving some sort of repetition. So once again, hopefully you found this video useful. As always, don't hesitate to email me with any questions or comments. Keep in mind that this is meant to be a starting off point, not the end all and be all of formatting integers. This is just supposed to give you an introduction to how you can control printing the integers. As always, thank you for watching.